Hi everyone, and welcome to our Activity 1 practice set. In Activity 1, we're going to be focusing on an introduction to the Microsoft Excel environment. Since Excel will be used every single week in this class, we'll go over some fundamental formulas and keyboard shortcuts so that you kind of know how things work in the cells in Excel. And then we'll also look at some methods of data organization and visualization, so primarily making graphs and knowing how to organize data to get certain table formats or graphs that you might be interested in making. For our general instructions, just make sure you have all of your activity materials downloaded. These are posted on Beachboard already. All of the instructional videos that I post for the activity, you can start, stop, replay as much as you need. And then once you've completed the videos, you can try taking the Activity 1 practice quiz. So the quiz will just go over all of the practice sets that we're working through. And the first set that I wanted to show you guys was Excel familiarization. So we're going to look at what the layout of Excel is. If you've worked in Excel before, some of this might not be new information. But I like to cover my bases because I never know how much of Excel you guys have actually dabbled in. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys is the types of cursors that you'll be using. We'll go through the spreadsheet layout in a different video. The white plus sign that shows up, that's like kind of the default cursor. That's how you'll select cells. You can select a single cell, a range of cells. A black plus sign, when you hover over the bottom right-hand corner of cells, usually that black plus sign will pop up, and you can use it for copying or autofilling cells. When the down arrow or the right arrow show up, usually that's when you've hovered over a column label or a row label, and that when these icons show up, that will allow you to select an entire column or row. This is a resizing pointer, so if you wanted to reset the size of columns and or resize the set of rows, that's what it would look like. We also have a resizing pointer for if we have certain cell ranges that we've inserted into a formula and we want to expand or shrink those ranges. Moving hands, typically we'll use those if we are moving a selected range in a formula or graph. And then the editing cursor is pretty much like the little eye cursor that you see in my mouse right now. And that will allow you to edit text or cell contents. Other handy shortcuts that you might use on your keyboard are copy, cut, paste, undo, redo. Undo is probably my most used one. If you want to select multiple cells at one time, if you want to select multiple connected cells, and then any types of mathematical operations that you might be inserting in different formulas. I've put keyboard shortcuts for both Mac and Windows because for Mac it's Command, for Windows it's Control. I'm working on a Mac, so oftentimes you'll hear me say Command, but if you're working on a Windows computer, just know that you're pressing Control instead. I think keyboard shortcuts are a lot easier than right-clicking all over the place in Excel. So, yeah, I would say kind of go through those if you're not familiar with those shortcuts, and as the class goes along, you'll find out what you like to use and what you don't like to use. So I'm going to stop this recording real quick just to get us into the spreadsheet layout, and then I'll help you kind of get familiarized with how Excel is set up. So this is our Excel environment, and the top section is very similar to what you would see in Word, where you have different tabs that you can navigate through to put in certain tools or items or whatever. The Home and Insert tabs are where you're going to be spending most of your time. Home tab is where you have most of your formatting options and tools. So if you wanted to add borders, if you're making a table, if you want to change the fill color, text color, font sizes, changing the orientation of your cell contents. If we wanted to merge certain cells together, such as what I've done here, basically you can highlight, arrange, and then merge them into one. We can wrap text if we have a lot of text going into a certain set of cells. We can change the format of our numbers, increase or decrease decimal points. Any of our conditional formatting, sometimes we might want to highlight a certain cell based on a certain set of criteria. This edit section over here allows us to sort and filter data based on certain characteristics. We'll have some practice doing that in this activity. And then in our Insert tab, you can put in pivot tables. I don't typically use those, I just make my own. But if you wanted to insert any tables, shapes, this is where we'll put in all of our charts. And then if you have any extra symbols or text styling that you want to use, those are also in the Insert tab. The other area you might be working in is the View tab, and this allows you to change the page layout. Sometimes things go wrong, so if you never, if your spreadsheet doesn't show up looking like this is the normal, default view. We'll also use this section sometimes to freeze certain rows if we have a particularly long data set. So that's what the View tab does. Pretty much everything else in here we don't really use a whole lot. The Draw tab might be useful for some of you if you're taking notes in your spreadsheets as I talk about stuff, but that's completely optional and kind of more of a personal preference thing. So that's our Excel environment. Our columns are denoted by letters, so you can see when I hover over a column, that down arrow shows up. When I hover over any type of row, the side arrow shows up. So if I click, when those arrows show up, I can highlight entire columns or entire rows. The resectioning or resizing tool or icon will show up when you go in between two columns or in between two rows. And then other than that, our white selector plus sign, and then our black plus sign when we kind of hover over the bottom right hand corner of the boxes. So those were the cursors that I went through with you guys in the first part of this video. And then in the next video, we'll start going over some tools that will be helpful for you throughout this semester in terms of shortcuts and creating lists and graphs and whatnot.